The wind had teeth in the Redemption Mountains. It was a razor edge scouring snow from jagged peaks and driving it across Silas Thorne's vast ranch. Inside, his house was a solitary fortress. Its frost-coated windows stared into an unforgiving world. The only sounds were the crackle of pine logs and the restless shifting of Silas's own solitude, a suffocating weight even the fire could not touch. Today was the last day of the year, and that weight felt heavier than ever. Silas sat in his chair, a man carved out of granite and a great, deep, sad grief. His hands were a map of his history, scarred from wire and hardened by leather. Yet tonight they felt useless. He had built this life alone, keeping his memories locked away like cold mountain peaks. With a practiced motion he pushed the past down, his jaw tightening. Loneliness was the climate of his soul. In Redemption, he was respected but aloof. The town saw a man of iron, but they did not see the hollow void left 5 years ago when the fever took Sarah. He had walled himself in, his grief his only companion. Tonight, the silence was screaming. He pulled on his coat, telling himself he needed supplies. It was a lie. He was running from the ghost in the empty chair across the hearth. He needed to be reminded that the world was still turning, even if his heart had been frozen solid for years. At the edge of Redemption, in a shack of rotting wood, May sat wrapped in a threadbare blanket. Hunger was her constant companion, a gnawing hollowness echoing the emptiness since her husband perished in a mining collapse. Tonight was the Lunar New Year. Instead of dumplings, her table was very bare. Her only company was the mournful sigh of the wind. She clutched a jade pendant Wei had given her, the last anchor to their shared dream. After his accident, the town's suspicion curdled into vicious ostracism. She was the Chinese widow, a living reproach to those who had lost nothing. Earlier that day, Thomas Blackwood, the town's most prosperous landowner, had made a point of angling his horse away from her path, his lip curling with disgust. Blackwood was driven by the preservation of his name and wealth. He saw May as a blight, an unwelcome variable in society. He was the architect of the rumors that painted her as unlucky. She was being starved out by the cold cruelty of public indifference. May closed her eyes. She would not cry. Tears were a luxury. She had survived loss. She would survive this. But even the strongest tree can be snapped by a long enough winter. The mercantile was an island of warmth. Silas stepped inside, bringing a gust of frigid air. The store smelled of sawdust, cured meats, and lavender. Martha Miller, the proprietor, nodded at him. She was the town's quiet anchor. Silas gathered his supplies. He needed flour, coffee, and a massive cut of beef. As he approached the counter, he saw her. May stood by the stove, holding an embroidered silk pouch, trying to trade it for rice. Silas saw the dignity in her posture and the regret in Martha's eyes. "It is beautiful," Martha said softly, "but I have no one to sell it to, and the ledger is too tight. I am sorry." The refusal was a wall. May nodded, a movement of defeat, and turned to leave now. For a fleeting moment, her deep eyes met Silas's strong gaze. It struck him like a physical blow. In those tired eyes, he saw a loneliness that mirrored his own. But he also saw an unbroken strength. She bowed and slipped out into the snow. Silas stood frozen. He placed his items on the counter. Martha pushed a small bag of candy toward him. "Silas, on the house," she said. He grunted and left, the chime of the bell marking his exit into the cold world where a woman was walking home to an empty table. The ride back was a battle. His mind was obsessed with the woman from town. He had spent 5 years honing his isolation into a shield, but the encounter had pierced it. Sarah's last words echoed. Do not let the silence win. He had failed her. He reached his ranch. The cabin felt cloying. He placed the beef in a pan, the sizzle sounding jarring. The image of May's face returned. Her loneliness was not a choice. It was a cage built by others. He felt a righteous shame. He was hiding from a ghost while she was fighting flesh and blood monsters. In that moment, a decision was made. He sliced the beef. Piling half on a second plate, adding potatoes and gravy, he wrapped it in a linen cloth. He was breaking a 5-year vow of solitude. He stepped into the storm, driven by purpose. He found her cabin, a dark shape at the edge of town. A single light shone, a tiny, courageous spark in the darkness. He knocked. The sound was a thunderclap. When the door opened, May stood there, silhouette against the candle. Her eyes widened, first in fear, then in confusion. Silas unwrapped the plate. "I made too much," he said, the lie feeling like truth. "It is New Year's Eve. No one should be hungry tonight." May stared, searching for a trap. She saw no pity, only an offer of human decency. She opened the door wider, a silent invitation. He stepped inside, out of the storm, bringing the warmth of his offering into her cold life. The air was thick with unspoken truths and the birth of a new hope. The inside of the cabin was barer than Silas could have imagined, yet impeccably clean. He placed the plate on the scrubbed table. May moved with grace, retrieving a cup and tea. The act was a statement of pride he understood without a word. They sat, the flickering candlelight carving shadows on their faces. The silence between them was not awkward. It was a space filled with the gravity of their circumstances. It was the silence of two people who knew the language of loneliness so well they had no need for small talk. Silas watched her eat. Every bite was a private moment of gratitude. Her presence was something entirely new, a still point in the storm of his life. May saw the scars on his hands, a real map. It was a map of hardship. But in his eyes, she saw not the cold hardness the town spoke of, but a deep sorrow. This was a man who had built a wall around a massive wound. She understood walls. The meal was a communion. "Thank you," she said. "The food was a great gift." "Why are you here?" she asked. "In redemption. This is a hard place. My husband," she said, her voice steady. "He believed in the mountain. He found the gold. But the mountain kept him. The finality hung in the air." Silas felt a righteous anger. He gestured to the silk pouch. "That was yours." She picked it up. "My mother made it for my wedding. The peonies are for honor and riches. She wished me a life I have not found here." "I had a wife," he said, her name spoken for the first time in 5 years. "The fever took her, and our child." In the shared language of grief, he had said everything. May reached across the table, a gesture of acknowledgement. The wall between them crumbled. They were no longer the stoic rancher and the Chinese widow. They were two survivors. They had found a harbor in the dead center of winter. In a town built on suspicion, an act of decency is a crime. The storm broke with the dawn. Silas left with a silent nod. He rode back, not with the ache of solitude, but with a strange new feeling stirring in his chest. Their moment of peace was a secret the town would not allow. Thomas Blackwood, riding at dawn, saw the tracks. A cruel smile spread across his lips. The proud Silas Thorne had revealed a weakness. By midday, the poison was spread. Blackwood painted a picture. He described the lonely rancher seeking illicit comfort. Silas rode into town and felt the change. The community he had peacefully coexisted with was turning against him. The confrontation came in front of the mercantile. Blackwood was waiting. "Thorne," he said, loud enough for an audience, "I thought a man of your stature would have better taste." Silas stopped perfectly still. He looked at Blackwood, his eyes flat. "You have something to say, Blackwood? Say it plain." Blackwood chuckled. "Some people are best left alone. They bring a sickness to a town." The threat was clear. Silas felt real anger. He thought of May's quiet dignity. "You stay away from her," he said. He walked away, leaving Blackwood unsettled. The ride home was a torment. The toxic whispers followed him. He reached his ranch and stared at the house. It had been his fortress against grief. Now it felt like a coward's retreat. Sarah's last words echoed. "Do not let the silence win." He had a choice. He could retreat or he could stand. He could turn his fortress into a shield. The next morning he rode to May's cabin. He offered her sanctuary, a home, and peace.